My daughter was discharged after a minor surgery. On the table, I found her papers next to a new life insurance policy her husband had bought. My name is Hélène. I am 70 years old. I spend most of my time in this garden, at my home in Lyon. I love the peace here, the feeling of damp soil in my hands, and the scent of roses in the morning. But this peace is not something I take for granted. I had to fight for it. A year ago, I discovered that hell is not some distant place. It can exist right within your own family, hidden behind smiles and promises. This story is about how I walked into that hell and pulled my daughter out. It all began with a silence. My daughter, Clara, lives in Nice. She is my entire world, especially after my husband passed away. Keeping in contact with her was vital to me. We used to speak every day, even if it was just for a few minutes, just to hear each other's voices. But then the calls became less frequent. Then came 2 weeks of complete silence, broken only by short, cold text messages from her phone. I am okay. I am busy. I will call later. Every day it was the same message. No details. No emotion. I knew she was busy. I knew my son-in-law, Marco, was an ambitious architect, always pulling Clara into his social circles and projects. I tried to tell myself that perhaps she was simply exhausted. But that thought could not quiet the growing unease inside me. This was not my Clara. My daughter, no matter how busy she was, would never let her mother worry like this. My sleep became fitful. During the day, I could not focus on anything. A mother's intuition is not some vague feeling. It is a very real alarm, and it was ringing loudly in my chest. That morning, I received the exact same message as every other day. That was the last straw. Waiting and worrying would solve nothing. I could no longer sit still in Lyon, imagining scenarios in my head. I had to act. I did not hesitate. I opened my computer and booked the first TGV train to Nice for the next morning. I packed only a small bag, enough for a few days, without telling anyone where I was going. This was not a visit. This was a mission. I had to go there. I had to see my daughter with my own eyes, and I had to hear her say with her own mouth that she was truly okay. On the train speeding south, I stared out the window but saw nothing. The beautiful French countryside passed by in a blur. Inside my head, everything was still. I had only one question repeating over and over: what is happening to Clara? At that time, I still thought that perhaps I was overreacting. I still held on to the hope that I would arrive, and Clara would open the door, smile, and lovingly scold me for worrying too much. I could not have imagined that the answer I was about to find was so much worse than anything I could have possibly conceived. The taxi stopped in front of the familiar iron gate. I paid the driver and stepped out. Immediately I knew something was wrong. The rose garden, Clara's pride and joy, was withered. The flowers drooped on their stems, brown and brittle. She loved that garden. She would never have let this happen. The antique brass mailbox on the wall was overflowing with unopened letters and magazines. It was clear that no one here had checked the mail in days. Procedure: laparoscopic surgery. Date of surgery: 1 week ago. I had to read it 3 times to understand. Surgery. My daughter had undergone surgery without me knowing. She had been in a clinic all of last week, and she had not said a single word to me. Why? Why would she hide something so important from me? 100 questions spun in my head, but there were no answers. Only a cold, dreadful feeling spreading through my chest. Just then, the phone in my pocket rang with a piercing sound, shattering the dead silence. I looked at the screen. Quelle ID? Nice Central Hospital. My hand was shaking so much I almost dropped the phone. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before answering. Hello, Hélène speaking. Madame Hélène, this is Dr. Fournier from Nice Central Hospital. I am calling about your daughter, Mademoiselle Clara Rossi. The man's voice on the other end of the line was professional, but there was an urgency in it that made my stomach clench. Clara? Is she there? What is wrong, doctor? There was a short pause. Madame Hélène, I am very sorry to have to tell you this over the phone. Your daughter is in critical condition. The world tilted beneath my feet. I had to grab the kitchen counter to stay upright. Critical? What do you mean? She just had surgery. The paper says she was discharged. That is correct, madame. But she was admitted here last night. She has severe sepsis, a complication from the surgery. Currently, She is in a deep coma. Coma. The word echoed in my head like a death knell. We are doing everything we can, the doctor continued. But I think you should come here immediately. We have tried to contact her husband multiple times, but the emergency number he provided is unreachable. I do not remember how I hung up the phone. I do not remember how I called a taxi. The entire ride to the hospital was a blur. I only remember sitting in the back seat, my hands clasped together so tightly my knuckles turned white, repeating a single sentence in my head. Please, do not let anything happen to her. At the information desk, a nurse directed me to the intensive care unit. She added, in a flat, emotionless voice, her husband brought her in last night. He said he had to go to Monaco for an emergency, and then he never came back. I looked at my daughter through a thick pane of glass. My Clara, my brilliant daughter, was now pale, fragile, lost amidst a tangle of machines and tubes. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was the only sign of life in the room. I went inside, sat down in the chair next to the bed, and took her cold, limp hand in mine. My tears would not stop falling. Where was Marco? What in the world was he doing in Monaco while his wife was here, alone, facing death? In my desperation, I did something I had never thought to do. I needed to find him. I needed an answer. I pulled my tablet out of my bag. Without a moment's hesitation, I opened Instagram and typed into the search bar, Marco Rossi. His profile appeared immediately, and the first thing that caught my eye was not a photo. It was a short video freshly posted. Marco. He was standing on the deck of a super yacht. He was smiling. He was wearing a white silk shirt unbuttoned at the top, his hair blowing in the sea breeze. He was raising a glass of champagne. Next to him was a stunning blonde woman, leaning her head on his shoulder. They both looked at the camera and beamed. Below the video was a flood of congratulatory comments, and then I read the caption. Closing the deal of a lifetime. Cheers to the future. I had to look again to make sure my eyes were not deceiving me. A deal, the future? Was his future being built while his wife was dying here? Everything inside me went silent. The air in my lungs felt like it had been sucked out. The pain in my chest did not disappear. It just condensed, transforming into something else, something cold and sharp. This was not carelessness. This was not an urgent business trip. This was betrayal. A cruel, unimaginable betrayal. And in that very moment, beside my daughter who was fighting for her life, I knew that I no longer had time for tears. I had to find the truth. I sat there, in the near absolute silence of the intensive care unit, broken only by the steady rhythm of the machines. The tablet was still glowing in my lap, the image of Marco and that woman frozen on the screen. It was all so absurd. How could a man whose wife was in critical condition be partying like that? Where did the money for such a lavish party come from? Marco made money, but not the kind of money to throw around on super yachts. A cold thought crept into my mind. The trust fund. My husband, before he passed away, had set up a sizable trust fund to secure the future for Clara and our grandchildren. He had been very careful, appointing me and Clara as the two main trustees. But a year ago, when Marco presented a major real estate investment opportunity, Clara convinced me to add his name as an authorized signatory, so he could be more flexible in his work. I had reluctantly agreed. I had trusted my daughter's judgment. My hand trembled as I found the number for Monsieur Bernard, my family's longtime bank manager who directly oversaw the fund. It was late, but I did not care. I dialed. Monsieur Bernard? Hélène speaking. I apologize for calling at this hour, but this cannot wait. It is no problem, Madame Hélène. What is the matter? You do not sound well. I need you to check the most recent activity on the family trust fund. Specifically, any transactions made by my son-in-law, Marco Rossi. I heard the clicking of a keyboard on the other end of the line. Monsieur Bernard was silent for a long moment. Too long. Madame Hélène, he hesitated. There was a very large withdrawal made 3 days ago. 500,000 euros. My throat went dry. 500,000? What reason did he give? He said it was a deposit for a major real estate project in Monaco, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He provided some preliminary documents. Can you see the details of the expenses? Where did the money go? Another pause. This time, Monsieur Bernard's voice sounded genuinely confused. This is a bit strange, madame. The money was not transferred directly to a real estate escrow account. It was broken down. There was a large payment to a yacht charter company called the Serenity. Another sum was used to purchase a Patek Philippe watch at a boutique in Monaco. And the largest amount, €250,000, was transferred to a consulting firm named Elysian Investments. My head was spinning. A yacht, an expensive watch. None of it sounded like a real estate investment. He had lied. He had taken my family's money meant for the future of Clara and my grandchildren, to fund his extravagant lifestyle. But one name kept circling in my mind. Could you please repeat the name of that consulting firm? Certainly. It is Elysian Investments. I thanked Monsieur Bernard and hung up the phone. The picture was beginning to form, but the pieces were still scattered. A husband who abandons his dying wife to go party. A huge sum of money siphoned from the family fund. A mysterious company. Everything pointed in one direction. The direction of a systematic and calculated deception. I sat motionless on the hard hospital chair. The smell of antiseptic filled my nostrils, but I no longer registered it. All of my senses were focused on a single name. Elysian Investments. What did it mean? Why would Marco transfer such a large amount of money to a consulting firm? I opened the tablet again. My hands were no longer shaking. Now they moved with a cold precision. I typed Elysian Investments into the search bar. The first result was a professional and sleek-looking website. The headline on the homepage read, "Shaping Your Financial Future." I clicked on the Our Team section. And then I saw her. The portrait of the company's CEO and founder was staring right at me. Golden blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, a confident smile. It was the woman from the yacht. Her name was Isabelle Dubois. My heart stopped for a second. This was not a coincidence. This was a connection. My eyes scanned down the company description, searching for an explanation. I skimmed past the complex financial terms, the promises of profit and security. And then I stopped at a small line of text, placed at the end of the services section. The words appeared, clear and chilling. Elysian Investments, specialists in high-value life insurance policies and risk management. Life insurance. Those two words hit me like a lightning bolt. All the scattered pieces suddenly clicked into place, forming a monstrous picture. The minor surgery that Clara never told me about. The random sepsis that followed. Marco's disappearance. The party celebrating a deal of a lifetime. The huge sum of money transferred to a life insurance consultant. This was not neglect. This was not a sordid affair. This was a plan. A horrible thought flashed through my mind. A thought so dark it made me feel sick to my stomach. They were not just waiting for her to die. They were trying to kill her. I was no longer a grieving mother. In that moment, I became an investigator. I shot up from my chair, a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. I walked decisively to the head nurse's station, my voice firm, without a trace of a tremor. "I am the mother of the patient Clara Rossi. I need to see all the paperwork her husband signed when he admitted her last night, right now." The head nurse looked at me, perhaps surprised by the sudden change in my demeanor. But something in my eyes must have told her not to refuse. She retrieved a file and handed it to me. I flipped through each page, my heart pounding in my chest. Treatment consent forms, personal information, and then, clipped behind the emergency contact sheet, I found it. A copy of a life insurance policy. Policy value, €5 million. Name of the insured, Clara Rossi. Policy effective date, 2 months ago. And the final line, the line that confirmed all of my worst fears. Sole beneficiary, Marco Rossi. I stood there, in the middle of the busy hospital corridor, holding the evidence of a murder plot. Their plan was to stage Clara's death as a tragic medical accident. And they had almost succeeded, but they had made one mistake. They had not counted on me. A cold calm washed over me. The pain and fear were gone, replaced by a single objective, justice. I stepped into a quiet corner of the hallway where I could speak privately. The phone in my hand was no longer a communication device. It was a weapon. I made 2 calls. The first call was to Jean-Pierre, my family's lawyer, an old friend of my late husband. He picked up immediately. Jean-Pierre, it is Hélène. I need you. This is not a civil matter anymore. This is a murder case. I could hear the stunned silence on the other end of the line. I did not give him time to ask questions. I spoke briefly and clearly, laying out everything I had discovered in the last few hours. The surgery, Marco's absence, the party on the yacht, the trust fund, Elysian investments, and, finally, the €5 million life insurance policy. I am sending you all the images and documents I have. I finished. Be ready. Things are going to happen very quickly. The second call was harder. I took a deep breath and dialed the number for the French criminal police. My name is Hélène Dubois, I said, my voice astonishingly steady. I want to report an ongoing murder and insurance fraud conspiracy. The victim is my daughter, Clara Rossi, who is currently in a coma at Nice Central Hospital. The two main suspects are her husband, Marco Rossi, and a woman named Isabelle Dubois. I gave them every detail. The name of the yacht, its last known location, the evidence of the financial transactions, the copy of the insurance policy. I spoke methodically, leaving nothing out. The officer on the other end was skeptical at first, but as I presented the evidence, his tone changed. He asked me to stay on the line while he verified the information. Everything after that was a blur. I do not know how long I had to wait. I only know that while I was on the phone with the police, a patrol boat from the French Maritime Gendarmerie was quietly leaving port, cutting through the dark waves towards Monaco. I was not there to see it, but my lawyer described it to me later. When the police raided the super yacht, the Serenity, the party was at its peak. The music was blasting. Champagne was flowing. Marco and Isabelle were dancing, drunk on their impending victory. They had no idea. The music cut out abruptly. The blue and red lights of the police boat swept across the bewildered faces. Marco and his mistress were separated from the crowd, the colour draining from their faces. The cold steel of handcuffs snapped around their wrists right there on the luxurious deck, in front of all their guests. The devil's party was over. Meanwhile, I had returned to the hospital room to sit beside Clara. I had done everything I could. The rest I could only leave to fate. I held my daughter's hand, still so cold and limp. I leaned in close, whispering in her ear. It is over, my daughter. It is all over. Mama is here now. And then, a miracle happened. Beneath my fingers I felt a slight twitch. Very faint, but it was real. I held my breath. One of Clara's fingers moved slightly. Then another. Her eyelids fluttered. Slowly she opened her eyes. They were clouded and unfocused, but she was looking at me. A single tear rolled down her gaunt cheek. And then, I heard it. A sound so faint it was barely audible, yet clearer than any music in the world. Mama. I burst into tears. Not tears of sorrow or fear. They were tears of relief and hope. My daughter had come back. The following months passed in a strange, dreamlike state. By day, I was a devoted mother, a grandmother caring for two small children who were confused by the sudden absence of both their father and mother. By night, I was the key witness in a criminal investigation. The trial of Marco and Isabelle was a media sensation. The press called it the Azure Yacht Case. Every detail of their plot was laid bare for the public. The planned surgery, the intentional neglect that led to the infection, the life insurance policy, the premature celebration. With the irrefutable evidence I had provided, their lawyers had no defense. They received the sentences they deserved for their crimes. I felt no satisfaction watching them being led away. I only felt an emptiness. Justice had been served, but it could not erase the damage. Meanwhile, Clara's true recovery was only just beginning. She had cheated death, but the scar left by the betrayal was far deeper than any surgical scar. There were days she would just stare silently out the window. There were nights she would cry out in her sleep. I was with her every day, not judging, not pushing. I was just there, cooking her favorite meals, reading to her, and holding her when she needed it. My two grandchildren, Leo and Chloe, were the best medicine. They were too young to understand the full horror of what had happened. They only knew that their mother had been sick, and now she was home. Their innocent love pulled Clara out of the darkness, little by little. 6 months later, we decided to sell the villa in Nice. That house, once a symbol of a dream, was now just a place filled with painful memories. We needed a new start. And we found it by returning to Lyon, to the house where I grew up, where Clara had spent her childhood. We cleaned up her old room, filling it with the children's laughter. Our lives slowly settled into a new rhythm, a quieter, simpler, but much more genuine one. Now, a year has passed since that fateful day. Marco and that woman are in prison. The trust fund is secure, but my greatest victory is not those things. My victory is right here, in this garden. I look up. Clara is walking out of the house, holding a tray of freshly baked cookies. She looks healthy. The color has returned to her cheeks, and I can see the light back in her eyes. Leo and Chloe run out after her, cheerfully fighting over the warm cookies. Clara looks at me and smiles. A real smile, with no trace of strain. "Are you thinking about it again, Mama?" she asks. I have not told her the whole truth about the plot. Some wounds do not need to be reopened. She just needs to know that she is safe, and that she is loved. I shake my head and smile back. "No, I was just thinking about what we should have for dinner tonight." She laughs, and her laughter mixes with the children's. That sound is the most beautiful music in the world. The storm taught me a valuable lesson. Sometimes the strongest love is forged from the cruelest betrayal, and a mother, when cornered, will do anything to protect her child. The storm has passed, and after the storm, the roses in my garden seem to bloom even more brilliantly.